Skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been. Skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been. This principle has helped Winston Binch, first as an ice hockey player at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Go Bantams. We have some new fans out there. And also throughout his career at places like Sony, RGA, Crispin Porter, and now as the Chief Digital Officer for Deutsch North America. And from what I understand, when they make you the boss of an entire continent, you're kind of a big deal. Winston Binch.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Great intro. That was maybe the best intro of all. You put hockey in there. No one's ever done that. Thank you very much. So hey, VCU. I'm excited to be here. So you heard I'm from Deutsch. We're not Germany or the bank. And the reason we have this slide on our website because, particularly when you go to Europe, you mention Deutsch, people immediately go to like the bank or the country. So we're not that. We're a creative design and digital agency in New York and LA. So yes, I run North America, but it's really 2 offices. And we're huge VCU fans. Rachel's here right now with us. But we've had 17 VCU students come through Deutsch in the last 5 years. And they've all, and I'm not BSing you, they've all been massive contributors. And in unexpected ways, and I think what I really love about VCU is many of you are hybrid thinkers. You know, you don't just think in a linear way. Maybe I always look for Swiss Army knives. People can think about strategy, about business and creativity and technology. And you guys are among the best. So cheers. So we have Rachel, Corey's in New York, Morgan's in LA, and she just helped us win the 7-Eleven pitch. Thank you, Morgan. And then Andrew was just named one of the most creative people under 30. So amazing team. Glad to be here. So today, I'm going to tell you about my story, at least parts of it, and the importance of being unreasonable. I don't mean to be an asshole, but I mean to be unreasonable, right? And that's Eleanor Roosevelt, if you don't know who that is, and she was one of the most popular people of the 20th century. But if you know about her, she was outspoken. She spoke out for racial justice. She disagreed with the president, her husband at times. She was a real agitator for change and one of the most important women and leaders of the 20th century. And I looked to her, originally I was going to put Bob Dylan. I'm a huge Dylan fan, and I studied performing arts at Trinity and history as well, and studied Dylan, and I think, if you track his career, he was much the same way, but I think Eleanor kind of takes the cake. So I'm going to talk about how to make innovation that matters. I love innovation. It's what drives me, gets me up in the morning. How to make your parents happy. You'll see it through my story, they weren't always happy with me, but I think they're proud. And then how to have fun. This isn't banking. You're not going to be a lawyer. This is about creativity and driving culture, right? It's a fun thing to do. So this quote, I love, and it's a little outdated in A Reasonable Man, but let's just read it for a second here. The reasonable man adapts to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the reasonable man. And I think you'll see it through my story, is that, I think I'm a pretty nice guy, but I have high expectations, and I always want to try and do the right thing, even if it's an unpopular idea. So let's start at the beginning, go way back. That's an old ad. So my name's Winston. I'm from Connecticut. I had red hair, a really big nose, and this interesting name. And when I was young, I had an early disdain for advertising because there's this amazing ad slogan, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. So wherever I went, that followed me around for years and years. So when I was growing up, I had no ambition of being in advertising whatsoever. I accidentally arrived here, but I happily arrived here, right? What I wanted to do, I played ice hockey in college, played sports, but I was also a musician. I love music, and I wanted to make a big creative dent in the world. And halfway through college, I picked up theater, so I got really into theater, and I ended up going to New York City with a dream of becoming a working musician or an actor. along the way, I got my first job at this show called The View. And, I had some ins in the TV world. And I was kind of torn because, again, I really wanted to be an artist and a musician, but I also wasn't, I don't think, brave enough to really take that leap and put it all out there. So I ended up working the show The View. It's pilot season. This was for a Heartbeat. And at the time, I was working the graveyard shift, so I was getting up around 4 in the morning, going into the office around 5, working in a pitch black studio in the basement of the building, and I was the production coordinator. And so what I'd do is every day I would sit in the meetings in the afternoon, going down the rundown of what we were going to do. And I worked with the paint box artists. If you know the chyrons and the graphics that show displayed on the monitors behind the talent's head, I was working with those artists. I was also staying up till about 1:30 in the morning in clubs trying to play music. So this was a live TV show. We went on at 11. I figured out how to do it. I got along great with the production artists, but I tried to game the system a little bit. And so what happened is I'd be pretty tired coming into work, and in the pitch dark, we put Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen on. As the guys were assembling the work, I'd say, well, I'm just going to kind of rest a little bit, take a cat nap. And so that worked, got through, the work was done, and then one morning, I hear silence, and I just knew something was bad. And I opened my eyes, and Barbara Walters is standing right there. And I go, oh, shit. So that week, the director, Mark Gentile, who I owe a debt of gratitude, fired me. And in front of people, a lot of people. And he said, Winston, you're maybe one of the brightest kids in this building. You're not a morning person. And there's thousands of people that want this job more than you out there. So get the fuck out of here and do what you love. And I was humiliated. I'd never failed like that. And it was my first job coming, into the world, right? So then I decided on my walk home that I was going to lean in to music. I was going to pursue what I wanted to do. And I played in this band called Stereo Bait. And we were a touring band in the New York and the East Coast, and I did that for a bunch of years. And I worked in film and TV to support myself as a production assistant. And it was really hard, but what I loved about this is pre-social, is that it really taught me about being an entrepreneur. You had to kick doors down. No one wanted to hear us, and you really had to fight hard to even get anyone's notice. And in many respects, what you consider success, we never got signed to a major label. We failed. But I learned so much, and I don't regret a thing. I wouldn't take back that experience ever. Create some lifelong friendships. So I'm going along, music is my passion. My parents are not happy at this point. They're wondering what I'm doing, and I said, this is my dream. I'm going to pursue it. And then I met this lady, my wife now, and she was a fine artist. She went to SVA. She was a few years older than me, and she had, worked working in production design for Disney and other companies. She talked some sense into me. She said, you know what, you have too much of a gift, you're a bigger thinker, and maybe this music thing isn't the right thing for you. So, fortunately, this is around the late 90s and moving into 2000s. The web is blowing up, right? The digital economy is just emerging. And this is pre-bubble. The internet bubble kind of crashed in the early 2000s. But I ended up getting a job at Sony Music Online. And I knew nothing about programming, nothing about computer science. I took one class, but I had a friend, and he was able to convince his boss that, maybe I could help out from a production standpoint. So I got a job running production on SonyClassical.com. And what was amazing about it, it was music, so again, I wasn't completely out of the music world, but back then there was no rules. And what I loved about that is that no one was there telling you what to do, and we were making things up as we went. And we were inventing the standards, inventing the practices. So I taught myself how to code up to Flash 4, not very good, but I taught myself how to copyright, so I was helping doing the copywriting for all these albums, like Joshua Bell up here. And I was also producing, so I was getting to do all this thing, and I was learning so much. And then all of a sudden, again, I'll get to this, but this Lawless thing was really something I liked. But then all of a sudden, these guys came out, Napster, and changed the music world forever, and pretty much annihilated the music industry overnight. And I remember being in some meetings with some music executives, and they just thought this was going to be fad. And being younger in the digital world, and coming up through there, I felt like differently. But anyway, I landed on my ass again. I started, but I knew at this point that I loved the digital world. And the other thing I loved about it, it was highly collaborative. I mentioned I played sports, I played in a band. I knew then that I'm much better when I'm surrounded around people with diverse abilities and thinking, and that, ideas, they challenge me to make myself better. And so I really like that team environment, and digital is that. It's usually have copy, code, creative all together. So I started my own business, web consulting business, and then, this was after the bubble crash, and there was no jobs in New York, particularly great digital ones. And RGA was really, digital agency in New York, and now they're global, really the hottest shop there was. And the work that they were doing with Nike, this is pre-YouTube, pre-Facebook, pre-social, it was the web. Nike was doing the most interesting creative marketing out there. And I wanted to get on that Nike team. So I had an in to a friend of mine, and I got a bunch of offers, but to work on other lines of business, and I just kept saying no. It took me 5 interviews. I did 5 rounds of interviews, and I finally made it onto the Nike team. And I was pretty bullish, and I'm like, I only want to spot the Nike team. Let's push for that. So I came in to work on this series for Nike basketball called Hooptown, which was a live, not a live show, but it was a web series that we created for LeBron when LeBron just came into the league, Vince Carter, Paul Pierce, and a few others. And the way it worked is we shot basketball courts around New York City, and then we grafted this guy, Logan, created these amazing pieces of graffiti through animation, and we put them on the wall here, and ended up winning a bunch of awards. But what was amazing about this experience for me is, again, now I'm moving into the world of content. I'm working with brands like Nike. And Nike, I learned so much from. They're such a creative company. And, RGA at that point was very production driven. We were all around user experience, all about building stuff. But Nike brought this amazing kind of cultural, cool, creative piece to my life, and I learned a ton there. And the next thing, I think the proudest moment I had there was, or the biggest learning I had was working on Nike ID, which is a shoe customization platform. And really changed the world of product personalization. So I did 2 versions of that site there. And, when I look back on my RGA experience, I didn't get a master's degree. I didn't do any continuing ed program, but it really was getting like a master's in web design and product development. I was surrounded by people from MIT, people who are much smarter than me. The amount I learned was incredible. And the thing I also learned very quickly is, they just kind of threw me into the fire. And I was on this team. I didn't even know that much about technology yet, but what I did know, going back to my roots of being in a band, I learned to quickly spot the smartest people in the room. And I said, well, I want those people on my team. So I found Scott Prindle, the best technologist, I pulled him in, and I found some of the best designers. And so we were able to really kind of come together and coalesce. And I think, if anything, my strength was my ability to spot talent and lead quarterback. So I was there, loved RGA. I was there for 3 years. And, one thing, though, at this time, digital was still the redheaded stepchild. Redhead, go figure. But we were still in the basement. We didn't have relationships in the C-suite. We had small budgets, and we weren't that close to the big ideas. Wieden and Kenny at that time was driving a lot of the big brand thinking. And then we were kind of the sideshow. Now, there's some benefits to that because we could fly under the radar. When your budgets are smaller, you have that real ability. But I wanted to be at the big table. And again, coming from a creative background in music, I thought myself as an idea person. And at that time, I would say RGA was about artful expression, right? Like in great design. And I wanted to move up further up the flagpole. So that next, for me, the next thing, part of my career was moving from technology to advertising. And I mentioned before that I had no ambitions of being in advertising. And I didn't really even realize at the time, but I was already in the ad business. These brand sites that we were creating for Nike were ads. But again, we didn't think of it as ads. We just thought of it as web products. And then I saw this work for Truth. You guys all familiar with Truth? Which is, I think, one of the most groundbreaking campaigns in many, many years. And if you even look at some of the results here over the 10-year period, these guys perhaps saved 500,000 lives. And that's creativity for good. That's the right type of creativity. And so I saw that stuff, and one of the ads they had run was, they put all these body bags out in front of the Philip Morris building. And what was really interesting and unique about this is that, in the 80s, Nancy Reagan was all about saying no. And when you tell young people to not do something, they do the opposite. The genius of this campaign was not about telling people not to smoke. It was just about saying, let's seek the truth. So I love this work, and I had no idea where it came from. And then I was driving up I-95, and I saw this out of home. And this is from Mini. It was launched in the US in the early 2000s. And at the time, SUV culture was dominant. And in fact, SUV sales were skyrocketing. So I drove this. I drove up and I saw this, and it immediately got my attention. It was a provocative idea. It challenged my conventional thinking. And I just thought, that's kind of a badass thing. And again, while I hadn't thought of advertising really before as a career option for me, this really stood out. And there's tension in it. And again, it really challenged you. So I love this piece of work. And then I saw this ad. And again, I wasn't a big ad watcher, but maybe you've seen this one, but it just immediately captivated me. And again, I kind of said, WTF? And then that's what I kind of look for in great work. But this
Big K chicken fries box to your big old pigskin party.
One of the things we always say is that no one cares what we have to say, right? No one wakes up in the morning to see your advertising the work you're doing. And so you've got to work hard to earn attention. And that's harder now than it was even back then. But that ad earned my attention. I thought it was clever, it was innovative. So the next thing that happened at RGA when we were there, we had an open work plan, which I loved. And whenever a great piece of work happened, you'd always see people huddled around a desktop. And this kept happening. And then there was this site called Subservient Chicken that came out. I think it was 2003. And everyone huddled around, I think my friend David's computer, and they were messing around with this. And if you haven't used this site, it really created viral marketing as we know it today. And it was hacked together. I always say it's a crude version of AI, which in a sense what it allowed you to do, you could type in any command and this chicken would do outrageous things. A guy in a chicken suit. And it was unbranded basically, and it was in support of a Burger King chicken campaign. So I saw that and I didn't love the idea, but at this point, I felt like we were doing the best digital in the world and no one else could really touch us. But what I loved about this is it was an interactive concept. It was a holistic idea. And it just felt a little mercenary and rogue. It didn't feel so commercial. So I went down, I ended up actually going down to CPB, and it was right after, my interview was after Katrina. So half the roof was ripped off in Miami. And I got down to this building, Jeff Benjamin, my partner, Paul Sutton, brought me down, and I went in there, and immediately, when I walked in, I felt like there was a revolution happening. The energy in the place was insane, and you could really feel it. And people were having fun. I go back to that. And I just walked in and I immediately needed to be in this place. It felt like this was where, the next creative revolution is happening. So I packed my bags, drove 26 hours down from Connecticut down to Miami, and I was there for 7 months. And it was an amazing, amazing ride. When I got there, it was just a few of us digital folks. And we grew the digital team to about 400 worldwide over 6 years. And we did some of the best work, I did some of the best work in my career. And also created some of the best relationships. And one thing that I really wanted to bring from RGA was not only understanding of craft and digital production and design, but I also wanted to bring technology to the creative department. And that was something very unique in the ad business. Everything got outsourced from a production standpoint. At RGA and digital agencies, we made everything. I think yesterday in my 5Q interview, I said if I wasn't doing advertising, I wanted to be a builder or a carpenter. I love making shit. And I think also when you have the ability and makers around you, it allows you to really see the value of an idea or what it can be or the possibilities. And once you start tinkering and making stuff, you often end up somewhere else from where you originally started. So the brief for me at at CBB was, we're an amazing idea factory and help us become more of a technology innovation company. And I think if we look back, we did that. One of my favorite things we worked on is this idea called Whopper Sacrifice. You guys familiar with this one? And, you know, Burger King, amazing client. We had Russ Klein, one of the best ever, brave person. You know, one year in 2006, we took the entire marketing budget and built 3 Xbox games. Pretty ballsy. But, you know, also, he knew a lot about strategy, and he came up and helped us write our brief, and he was a big believer in this notion of tension. You probably heard that word before, and I mentioned it earlier, but he really believed that to really tip the scales and get people to consider your brand and buy your product is that you had to put doubt in their mind, put a question there. And so for the Whopper, which is America's most loved burger, our brief was prove to America that Whopper is the most loved burger without chest pounding. And that we always had a simple directive and a mission at the top of our brief. But then also, again, that the tension there was that you can't just really go out and say you're number one, because no one's going to listen to you. So one of the ideas, I'm not going to show it, but was Whopper Freakout. And that idea was where we actually did a stunt where we removed the Whopper from restaurants and we filmed it. It was pretty awesome. The next one here is one that I worked on pretty closely, is Whopper Sacrifice. And this is 2008. This is early days of Facebook. It's hard to believe now. But we had 25,000 coupons, and I'll show you the video in a sec. And then one thing, Jeff Benjamin and I were sitting in his office, and Jeff and I were talking about Facebook and this notion of digital friends. And Jeff had said, well, I've got 1,000 digital friends here. But what's messed up is I think I've got like 2 in real life. And so and I agree with that. And then the other tension I had, I was adding on these friends, and if you use Facebook early, you realize it was sometimes you added the wrong people. And then I could never find the unfriend or delete option. So I'm like, well, we've got to make it easier. And back then, you could make branded apps, and there are some developer guidelines that let you do this, and they stated what you could and could not do. So Jeff came up with this idea of Whopper Sacrifice, which is if you delete 10 friends, we'll give you a Whopper. So it was a utility and also kind of fun. Here's the video. Thanks.
Burger King knew that America loved the Whopper, but wanted to prove it. So it turned to Facebook and put the love to the test. Everybody loves adding friends, but is that simply because it's fun to see your friend list pile up? Well, what if there was a way to dump friends and get rewarded for it? And what if this turned into a race to dump them before they dumped you? Meet Whopper Sacrifice. Delete 10 friends and receive a free Whopper. A true moral dilemma, a telling choice. What do you love more, your friends or the Whopper? A difficult question to answer. Or was it? Almost instantly, people were sacrificing their friends for Whoppers like crazy, to the tune of 200,000 friends sacrificed in just over a week. And people's burning desire to dump friends for the Whopper challenged the very concept of Facebook. Instead of embracing this new marketing opportunity and the 35 million free media impressions it received, Facebook began limiting its functionality, ultimately forcing Burger King to take it down. Whopper Sacrifice had been sacrificed. But despite the application's short-lived activation, Burger King proved what it knew to be true, that Americans love the Whopper more than they like their friends. Thanks for watching.
So that was a pretty fun one. Leading up to that, Jeff and I went to Las Vegas to meet with the Facebook executives, and we told them what we were going to do. And he's like, don't do that. And we're like, no, we're going to do it. And it's within your guidelines, and this is about being unreasonable. No, we're going to do it. And he's like, well, our team may take it down. I'm like, well, it's within the guidelines, so we're going to do it. And so that happened. And then once the story that you didn't see there is, so we put it up. And then during the week, we only had it up for a week. the Facebook developers were like hobbling it. So it was this cat and mouse game. And then we knew that we only had 25,000 coupons. So it kind of worked out great. We're like, take it down. We already have the second site worked up. Whopper Sacrifice has been sacrificed. And it ended up working out. But the interesting thing I'll talk a little about there is that this was a small bet. I mean, it was a small project. We did a ton. The Whopper Freakout campaign was huge. But this is something we kind of did off to the side. It was an extra credit idea, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, one thing that I'm really proud of is part of our job, right, is to really move culture. And it's very difficult. And often, right now, particularly on the web today, as culture is being created by the second from, it could be some person in a garage or at home, and it's not a brand that's doing a lot of this. But we were able to, we believe, help put Unfriend into the zeitgeist. And we got, word of Oxford University Press mentioned here, right? And then also, there was another side thing that came out, if you saw that note about, we actually figured out how Facebook get valuated, because we figured out a friend is worth 37 cents. So that was a great one. I'm just going to go through a couple more here. So this one, was something I worked on and super proud of. You probably are familiar with the Domino's Pizza Turnaround campaign, and that's something we did later on. But when you think about Domino's, they're really a fulfillment business. They're like FedEx, they're a delivery company. And we were brought in to do Domino's.com, and one thing we did, just at CBB, I talked about technology. We grew our technology engineering team to about 100 people. And so technology is a big part of what we did. And when we took on Domino's.com, the first thing we did is what I call technology archaeology, which is dig into their company, find out what they've got. And I mentioned they're a delivery company. They had this service that tracked the efficiency of their orders hooked up to all of their stores. It's called Pulse, or POS system. And they knew when the pizza went in the oven, who put it in there, and when it was coming out, when it was going out for delivery. So we found that, and we said, well, let's turn that into a marketing idea, and then that became Pizza Tracker. And we got this originally up in like 2 weeks because the tech was lying around there. But it was a huge thing. I think in 2011, Domino's became the 4th largest e-com site in the world in terms of transaction volume. So we are going up against Amazon and Staples. And the way we got there is, I really believe in audacious goals. We set out and we said, we want to be the Amazon of food ordering. And we just kind of stuck with that. And over time, it started to really happen. But it wasn't about just fast food. We turned baby carrots. We helped turn them from a veggie into a snack. And this is something that was really pretty interesting. It was a very small project for us. But one thing I learned at CPB is the power of strategy, and the notion that strategy is the idea, right? And the fact that if you don't have a strong strategic idea, that the expressions won't really punch. And so, with this strategy, our team went in, and I'm really a believer in field research and ethnographies. I hate focus groups. I really do. I could spend all day talking about them, but I really believe you have to empathize with your customer and get out in the field and understand them. So we sent some people into homes, and we realized that with baby carrots, what's happening is people get carrots and they put them into what we call the refrigerator drawer of death, which is, that drawer you have in your refrigerator. You put the carrots in, and you never pull them out again. And kids particularly will actually go to the cupboard because it's easier. So that's why they're going to snacks. So again, we came up with this strategic mission of turn veggies into a snack. And then the creative team kind of said, if we're going to be a snack, let's market like a snack. And let's actually market like junk food. So we came out with this campaign for baby carrots, eat them like junk food. And we actually, it was so popular, and we only ran it in 2 test markets, that they had to stop marketing because we were running out of supply. So a lot of things I learned there. So then, how do I get to Deutsch? So you all probably have seen this spot. I'm not going to show it, but it's the mini Darth Vader spot for Volkswagen done in 2011, which was one of the most shared commercials of all time up until, I think, a couple of years ago when Budweiser did that spot with all those dogs. Dogs are very hard to beat. In fact, the 3 pillars of the internet back then, when we were working with dogs, porn, and cats. So, I've had a lot of success with dogs on the internet, but they edged us. So Mike Sheldon, our CEO, my boss, he called me. I was at CBB. We were Agents of the Decade. We won Interactive Agents of the Year 3 of 5 years. And I built these amazing relationships. But I felt like I wasn't done, and I wanted a new challenge. And one thing I was very fortunate to have is an amazing mentor in Alex Bogusky. He was almost like an older brother to me, and I learned so much from him. And that's a key point of building your career, is working with amazing people and having great mentors. But one thing I hadn't gotten is a business mentor. And Mike was a really interesting guy, and immediately was taken by him. They had done this spot, but they had just picked up the VW business, and they really wanted to, again, become more of an innovation and a digital leader. And one thing I immediately was drawn to Mike is this he's an entrepreneur, and he invested in 20 developers ahead of any revenue. And that's for a big holding company and a big agency, that's a rare thing. And he really believed in the power of technology. He wanted to build stuff, not just ship it out. And so, we kind of locked arms, and I jumped on and moved to LA. And one of the visions that we talked on early on was this idea. I talked about teamwork. It's something we really developed at CBB and at RGA. It's just a cornerstone of everything we did. But I wanted to evolve and create a new model. And I'm a huge Pixar fan. If you ever read Creativity Inc., it's an amazing book. Recommend it. But what they've done, if you think about it, they've almost had a hit every turn. And they are a creative culture that combines left and right brain thinkers. And, they have storytellers and they have technologists. They all work together. They do something really cool that every director has to put their work through, called the demo, right, where they're essentially a bunch of people from all different kind of disciplines are reacting and giving feedback to a director's work. And I love that sense of collaboration. So we came up with an idea, and there's Rachel Mercer right here. What I wanted to do is create something called high tech, high concept. And this idea of creating an environment and culture that combines the best of branding, creativity, strategy, with the best of technology and user experience design. And really, this is what we've hung our hat on from a cultural standpoint for the last few years. And it isn't just something we say. That's me and my partner Pete Favat, who's the CCO. And Pete and I actually sit in the same office. And one thing I love about Pete, he joined the agency 3 years ago. He was the CCO at Arnold for a long time. And he worked in the Truth Campaign with Alex, so we kind of crossed paths a little bit before. But Pete is the most collaborative CCO I've ever met. And he really buys into the idea that an idea can come from anywhere. And you'll hear that from a lot of people, but it's lip service mostly. Pete likes to have designers around, account people around, technologists. It doesn't matter, right? Creativity is creativity, and we're all in the creative department. And Pete and I sit together, and again, that's modeling that way of left and right brain thinking. And Pete and I are responsible really for the product of the agency. I focus more on the big web products, but on integrated marketing campaigns, we both work together. And it's something we try and model for everybody. I think Rachel would agree with that. And we've done a lot of great work over the last 5 years. We've grown the digital business from 4% to 40% of the revenue. We've been called one of the most innovative companies in advertising by people like Fast Company. But really it's about the work. Everything's about the work. Chuck Porter once told me that the work is the sun. And I really wholeheartedly believe that. If you're doing amazing work, a lot of great things happen for your business. And this is something we did for Krylon, a small spray paint company, and won a titanium at this year's Cannes. I'll let it go. But I think it really expresses, this notion of high tech, high concept, being branded together with technology thinking.
Spray paint companies all talk about the same thing. Protection from rust, protection from rain, protection from whatever. But Krylon, the leading spray paint company, wanted to talk about something people actually cared about. So we showed how the worthless things you already own can be worth more with a simple coat of paint. We launched with a series of lighthearted TV spots featuring a family that bought, painted, and resold items back to their original owner for a massive profit.
I'll give you $2 for this.
Okay.
give you $30 for that.
Okay.
After the TV aired, we hit the road, bought 690 miles of worthless items, renovated them using Krylon products, and sold them on Pinterest in real time, helping launch the social network's new buyable pin functionality. From old lamps to wagons and furniture, the items were painted, photographed, and sold for at least double, giving all the money to charity. We used Twitter to spread the campaign from the road, giving fans over 100 ideas how to make their own worthless belongings worth something, with before and afters, animated GIFs, and how-to videos. Even the idea itself proved our concept of paying next to nothing and turning a huge profit. With the $200,000 investment, we gained $2.7 million worth of earned media and increased our daily visits to Pinterest by 400%. The world's longest yard sale, the first ever Pinterest yard sale, and millions of people who now see spray paint in a new and useful way.
Spray paint. So, nerd power, it's really important, and one thing I love with this program is that, this program isn't just training art and copy. You think about it. That's very important. In fact, I think writing is probably one of the most important skills you can develop. And I'll talk about that in a second related to AI, but great writers are in high demand. But we also need people that think about other problems and look at them in a different way from a UX perspective, from technology. And so again, we have about 40 engineers in Los Angeles and 10 or so in New York. And they sit in the creative department. And again, this is an idea that I really brought to the agency world 10 years ago. We invented this notion of creative technology, but we continue to do it, and we continue to see more and more gains. And one area that I'm super excited about is branded AI, and we have invested some resources and time over the last 3 years really digging into this. And if you start really looking at these numbers, they're real. Any Westworld fans? People watch Westworld? Yeah, good shit. But anyway, now it's very early days. We don't even really know what this is going to be. But one of the ideas that we launched last year is we built Taco Bell's e-commerce platform, Ta.co. And during the design process, one of our developers, Martin, who was in that picture, was sitting with a team, and everyone was using Slack, right, during the build. And Martin came with this idea, well, it would be kind of cool because we're working in this conference room for hours and hours, and it's hard to get food, is if we could do group orders through Slack using a chatbot. And so we ended up coming with this idea. Martin brought it forward, an engineer brought this forward, he designed it, and we brought it to the client, and it was called TacoBot. And this is a really great example of early AI. And one thing I love about AI is the potential is that it can be both utility, but it can also be engagement tool. It can be about emotion and function, and it can be a great way to have an ongoing relationship with your customer.
In 2015, Slack was all the rage.
Slack is trying to change the way you work.
Think about it as having social media.
But with all your colleagues in it, considered one of the fastest growing business apps in history.
Now, to be clear, Taco Bell didn't invent Slack, and we also didn't invent artificial intelligence. But we did use the heck out of both of them to change the way people order food together forever. Meet TacoBot, a totally new, totally intelligent way for people to order food together on Slack. Just tell TacoBot what you want, or tell TacoBot what you don't want. No clunky buttons or confusing commands necessary. Because we built TacoBot with an artificial intelligence engine, it can talk to everyone at the same time and understands natural language, even slang, and interacts like a real live human. So even though you're communicating with a machine, you don't have to talk like it. Divulge to TacoBot you're a little drunk, and like a good friend, it'll add a cup of water to your order because, well, you're drunk. Ask it to make your order vegetarian if you're into that sort of thing. Or be nosy and ask TacoBot about its dating life or its gym habits. In a word, TacoBot e-commerceized the top co-working platform on the planet. And it did it in a way that people couldn't stop talking about. TacoBot.
TacoBot.
A TacoBot.
TacoBot. TacoBot.
TacoBot.
Yeah, TacoBot works with Slack.
No, seriously, TacoBot was almost embarrassed by how much people loved it.
So you're like, yo, TacoBot,
I need a quesalupa. The Taco Bot is like, totally, let's do this.
Go ahead and say Taco Bot again. It's so fun. Yeah, Taco Bot.
So if Taco Bot can use artificial intelligence to revolutionize ordering on Slack, and its intelligence is getting smarter by the hour, what will Taco Bot be able to do next? Thanks for watching.
Taco Bot, it's fun to say. So that idea cost about $50,000. It wasn't, the client didn't ask for it. We brought it to them. I'm a big believer in that. Don't wait for the brief. And what I love about it, it's not a destination, it's a system. So this will be rolling out into Facebook. And it can, again, it's fun, it's a brand engagement, but it can also drive the bottom line. I think we got to remember, we are in the business of moving business. And I mentioned changing culture, but we change culture so that we can drive the business change. And I love the ideas that kind of are both utility and engagement apparatus or tool. And AI, again, I mentioned I'm super passionate about it. In the next few weeks, we're going to be launching a standalone service we're calling Great Machine, and that's a reference to Forbidden Planet. You don't know that. But we've done about 4 or 5 things in the branded AI space, and what we really want to focus on is bringing creativity to it. Because without creativity, AI is just a tool, and who wants to be just a tool? So that's a bit of my story, and I'll talk about 10 things I picked up along the way. Of course, I have to take questions after. So sadly, I still see a lot of ideas that come to my desk that are just scripts. And really, we got to remember that we're in the job of solving business problems through creativity. And a lot of the ideas that I've been a part of, the ones that are most successful, and we mentioned Best Buy 12 Force, but they were things that were unexpected. They weren't just scripts. They were ideas and business-changing ideas. So just remember that. I think this school is good at that, but it's not just about making ads. I love a great ad as much as everyone, but if you start with a core idea, an interactive idea, I always say, it's easy to translate across media. So invent creative solutions, not ads. Another thing, this is Gareth Kay, a Plant Great strategist, had this in one of the presentations, and I absolutely love it. Creativity is all connected to curiosity. And the best creatives I know are people that ask tons of questions. And even when you think you have the answer, you don't have it yet, I really believe. And so you just got to continue to ask and search and search and search for the truth. So be a great question asker, be super curious. And I really believe that you'll find the answer. The ideas are at the end of maybe the 6th question, frankly, sometimes. And you've seen this through the work, truth, right? I believe that the best strategies, one of my friends calls it a dirty little secret, but it is a revelation. It's a truth. It can be a product truth, it can be a consumer truth, or a cultural one. I love the Snickers work, right? Because it's that insight, you're not yourself when you're hungry. It's amazing, it's true. And just look at the extensibility of how long that campaign is moved on. Another campaign I love right now is Uggs do nothing. I have Ugg slippers, and that's exactly what they're great for. And then I think the campaign is like Tom Brady just laying around and Jeff Bridges. So truth is really important, and we always try and find it in our work. Intention, we talked about it. You can't. It's a race to be invisible. Brands are in a lot and basically doing that most if they don't put out provocative idea out there. And we talk about the notion of finding an enemy, and it's not always. You don't have to start a fight, but you have to put an idea out there that challenges thinking. Think back to that SUV, that mini example I had. And then simplicity. I think that we overcomplicate our work all of the time. And the ideas that truly break through are easy to remember. One thing I asked our teams to do is we have something called the Idea Charter. The Idea Charter is a one-page template that we use during the creative process. And we ask for 3 things. Write the PR headline, describe the idea in 140 characters, right, which I think is the most important thing, and then explain why it's an original and shareable idea. And that 140 character thing is really important. I also call it the pub test. If you can't explain your idea to someone, really succinctly, they're not going to remember it. There's a reason why adages have lasted for thousands of years. They're fluid, they can be passed along. So you've got to really be able to get that idea expressed simply. And that's not just a conceptual thing, it's also the execution. Do more with less. This is more important now than it's ever been. Growing up in digital, we had no budgets, like literally. So I kind of grew up having to do things for less. But now we're going to still see big Super Bowl campaigns, we do them. But brands are under enormous pressure to do more with the same budget. Just think of all the channels, new emerging media channels that are coming out. It's crazy, it's insane. Snapchat wasn't around a few years ago. So you have to have this mindset of like, what can I do with $5? And I go back to Dollar Shave Club, right? They did that. Mike Dubin did that video for $5,000, and he just sold his company for $1 billion, right? So you need that mindset. Everyone wants to do big productions. I love making giant websites, but most of the stuff we do is for a song. Set audacious goals for yourself, but also for your work. If you go back to Domino's, they said we want to be the Amazon of food ordering. We really, if you want to change culture, shoot for Mars. And I was like, go past the moon, just go to Mars. Maybe be going there soon. But think audaciously. And again, also for yourself, challenge yourself. If you say it enough, you make it mantra, things happen. A lot of what we do is when I work on these big projects, we did a redesign for Volkswagen.com a few years ago. And we wanted to make a dating site for cars. So we called it the Match.com of car shopping. And in the room, we put up a big sign and it said, "Match me to cars I love." And we just repeat that over and over. And if you do it enough, sometimes it happens. Another thing, I learned again, great design matters a ton. We live in a visual world more and more. But I also think that everything you do needs an idea. And I really mean, when I'm saying this, I want to apply that to web and design work. It's not enough to make something look beautiful. I just mentioned the Match.com of car shopping. Everyone builds car sites, there's configurators, they all look the same, they're glorified brochures, but ours stood apart. And you want to stand apart, you should treat your design and your web like marketing rather than IT. Choose your boss wisely. I've been very fortunate to have mentors, like I said, Gusky, and many others, frankly, and Mike Sheldon. And this also applies to your clients, right? We are in the creative service business, and the clients take all the risk. You want to work with brave and great people, and I think that you always want to find mentors that are going to challenge you and excite you and push you into new territories. And I think I've been very lucky, and also going back to work with Bob Greenberg and Stephen Plumley and all the amazing people at RGA and Nick Law. I've had people that have really challenged me to think differently about my role. Selling work, right? So how do you sell these things? I'm a huge believer in prototyping, and generally when I've prototyped an idea and brought it, particularly digital ideas, most of them are sold. And I think when you're working interactive and digital innovation, it's hard for clients to imagine the possibilities. When you read a script, we've been reading scripts for ages, so it's easy for them to kind of visualize it. But even in TV now and in video content, we actually prototype stuff. And it really helps. And then, data is really important. It's not up there. You have to have a business case, but passion wins. If you love that idea, I've had examples where I've tried to sell an idea for a client and it took like a year and a half, maybe longer. But you keep coming back, you believe in it, and you have to be respectful, right? I mean, that's a big piece of this, but there is an unreasonability that's there. And if you love it, it's easy for everyone in the room to start to love it too. You've got to have a lot of energy for your work. I said this before, but don't wait for the brief. I see too many people in this business that just sit around waiting for a planner or a strategist or account person to tell them what to do. Well, our job, we're supposed to be, when we work for brands, we have to be creative all the time. And I love what Brian Eno has said, that his best ideas, sometimes they come in the shower. For me, ever since I was at CBB, I started working out during lunch hour. Like getting out, raising my heartbeat, And, I always say that my best ideas come when I'm have 150 beats per minute or, more. When I'm active and doing things, going out, getting inspired. And, when those ideas strike, and I think Taco Bell's a great example. The client did not ask for that. It was just something that, we thought would be a great idea and that would solve, some business problems for them. So don't wait for the brief, be proactive, be creative all the time. And then here, this is really important. And, this is kind of goes back to the importance of being unreasonable, is I believe a lot of what you get from clients still today, it's amazing, it's 2017, but particularly bigger clients, they still want TV ads, they want content, they want pretty traditional advertising, but it isn't always the right answer. And you have to meet the ask, meet the brief, but also bring them what they need every time. I remember we pitched eSurance a few years ago, and they explicitly said, do not bring digital ideas. And I was new to the agency, and I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. I'm going to bring the ideas. And we went through the presentation, and I politely said, well, great advertising is going to change your brand, but it's not going to be enough. You're a digital company. You need to change your experience. And Rachel and team actually, we didn't end up getting advertising work, but we did win digital work from them. So I think that's a great example of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, and really bringing the right solution forward. And you can do it respectfully. So here, takeaways, from, there's many more probably, but again, creative solutions, not ads. Be a question asker. You can never go wrong that way. Seek truth. Employ tension, keep it simple. Do more with less, be scrappy as hell. That'll get you far. Be audacious, right? Put an idea into everything you do. Choose your boss, your clients wisely. Prototype. Don't wait for the brief and be a little unreasonable. So the last thing I want to leave you with, people know Maggie Rogers. You guys seen this video? We're going to watch it again because it's amazing. But this thing was maybe my favorite piece of content I saw on the web all last year. So it's kind of long, but
Say the same thing all over again. This next person has as much heart as any human being I've ever known. I'm quite serious. Mags Rogers. So tell us about yourself as an artist. She's got an interesting past.
I grew up in a very rural area in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I grew up as a banjo player and always made folk music and loved being outside, and that's my space.
Wow.
I came to school here and made banjo music, and made folk music. And
What kind of postmodern stuff too? I mean, it was not just boom chicka.
No, I was like...
Which could be cool, by the way.
Yeah, I made very straight ahead folk music, I'd say.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of where my soul is, but I stopped making music for a couple of years in the middle of school and just went through some things and developed and learned some more about myself. And I studied abroad in France and had a really spiritual experience with dance music there. And suddenly this thing that had always been the most unnatural and the most artificial, I understood the release of it and the sort of since there was a fire, people were beating sticks together. And suddenly it became the most natural thing. So I just started making music again a couple months ago, and I can't make enough.
Yeah.
And all I want to do is kind of combine that folk imagery and harmony and natural samples that I've been picking up while hiking over the last couple of years with the sort of backbone and energy of dance music. So I'm very...
Proposition, I love that. It is. It is.
Well, we'll see if I'm successful, but
Avicii had a. It's not country, but it's not folk, but Avicii had a big record, and country melodies and progressions in it.
Yeah.
So it's if he can pull that off, certainly you can pull off folk. I can't wait to hear it.
Is this song all finished?
It's. I'm just trying to make as much as possible, so it's good for now. It would probably need a couple more hours of mixing and mastering, but.
I was walking through icy streams that took off. Moving slowly through a swift water over glacial plains and walked off you. Walked off. Oh my, I thought it was a dream. So it seemed.
Wow. I have zero notes for that. And I'll tell you why. It's because you're doing your own thing. It's singular. It's like when the Wu-Tang Clan came out, like no one could really judge it. You either liked it or you didn't, but you couldn't compare it to anything else. And that is such a special quality, and all of us possess that ability. But you have to be willing to seek, and you have to be willing to be like real frank in your music and frank in your choices. And sometimes like most of the time people will say, okay, I'm gonna make this kind of song, so it ends up sounding like something we've heard before or felt before, and I feel like what your whole story, I can hear it in the music. I can hear the journey of like you having that kind of background. And then I love your singer-songwriter verses, which singer-songwriters are the best to me. Like, I love them, That's what I love about them. So, I hope you like that one. I think what that shows, what I love he says at the end is that be singular. You can't be incomparable, right? And I think that is not just something about art. It's an idea that's really important in marketing as well. And, a mission that we have, a creative mission for the agency, is invent the most original and shareable work in the world. And originality is really difficult. And some people at the agency are like, whatever, it's too hard. But originality to me is just about trying to do something that feels like news. It's combining, like he said, combining two different forms to create something new. Your marketing has to stand apart. Your ideas have to stand apart. Originality is the highest bar.
Shareability to me is about trying to make $1 work like $10 million. And again, Rachel talks about this, but organic social is kind of dead. We live in this paid social world now, but we still imagine we have to come up with creative ideas that can market themselves. So I just love that video. I think it's a great way to finish, but the original Shoot for Mars, go for it. Thank you. One other thing too, I'll be around, we can talk, but we have a creative residency program in New York and LA called DPrep, and applications will be opening soon. Beth Armstrong's here with us, so a creative recruiter, Rachel's here, and we'll stick around. But yeah, thanks a lot. Questions? Are we doing that? Or? Anyone?
Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Do you have any examples of this space of paid social that's just really original, that's kind of moving forward in that direction?
There's Rachel behind you will have more examples, but one brand that I think is doing really well over the last year in paid social is Dollar Shave Club. And I think if you follow them and start looking at their ads, one thing they do is that, and we struggle with this, right, because the space moves so fast, is but a lot of brands still, and agencies will take what they've done in TV or and slap it on the web. That's just the worst thing to do. You have to design for context and for the medium. And I think one thing we all know is people skip ads on the internet. They don't want to engage in an ad. So what Dollar Shave Club has done is they're using the paid social form, but they do it in a really entertaining, very human way. And it doesn't feel intrusive. It feels like something you want to engage with. So that's one brand I would check out. Thanks, Rachel.
Can you talk a little bit more about using creative to drive new business or new industries?
Yeah. It's in the agency world, clients don't come to us a lot for business changing, concepts. They go to the McKinseys, the BCGs, the world. But we, always say when we get engaged with a client early on is to let us deep into your business. And so we'll kind of meet with the CEO, and that's one reason why I left the digital world, because we didn't have the C-suite relationships, but often we'll be meeting with the CEO and the CMO. And that's an important thing, because then when you're bringing ideas, you're not just focused on making funny ads or emotional ads, which all are very important, but you want to work at a higher level. And using creativity to solve business problems, again, comes back to a very simple thing I look for in the brief. What problem are we trying to solve? And often you'll find that the brief will be like, sell this new product, and here are all the key benefits you need to get across. But you got to back it up. Again, what is the real problem that we're trying to solve for this brand? With Taco Bell breakfast, we did a campaign called Ronald McDonald a few years ago, where Taco Bell breakfast they tried to launch it multiple times, but no one would pay attention. McDonald's wins. Like Egg McMuffin, that's what people think of when they think about breakfast. So we worked with CEO Brian Nichol and team, and we really broke it down. We said, well, the business problem we're just trying to get awareness. We want people to be aware of Taco Bell breakfast. So we ended up coming with this campaign, fully integrated marketing campaign, where we took a bunch of people named Ronald McDonald from around the country and had them try the Taco Bell breakfast. And, we filmed it. And really our strategy was create a two-horse race. Go after the big one. And that's the enemy thing. But that to me that's an ad, but that's a business-changing piece of work, because we brought it back to trying to solve the core business problem. So, there's lots more examples. We were working with American Express Open years ago at CBB, and they wanted to introduce a new business card called Business Flex and make ads around it. And we said no one's going to pay attention. So we changed the name of the card to Plum. made the color different, and then we said we're gonna change the product name, and then we said we're only gonna issue 10,000, and we're gonna like time it out. And we ended up selling out, we got the subscribers in over 4 weeks. So it's just how you think. You know, again, this is like, don't just think about making ads, it's how can we use any creative means to solve a problem, you know?
I have two questions about Taco Bell. The first one is, you mentioned that you have a team of developers in California and another team in New York. So I was wondering if you guys did build this AI engine, or did you work with a third party like IBM or something like that?
We used Wit.ai as the platform, so Facebook owns them now. But we develop most of our, 80% of what we do in the agency, we build ourselves. And that's much different than most agencies. But yeah, we're working with Watson more and more, they're everywhere. Wit.ai, and some other engines.
Okay, and my second question was, why did you choose Slack over like a bigger messaging platform like Facebook Messenger or?
Because we were trying, the problem that we were starting, what we wanted to solve was group ordering, right? So again, drive group orders through TacoBell.com, and Slack is the best co-working platform out there. So we felt like it was just the starting point. If you think about groups and people in the office, we felt like that was the right platform. But again, it's going to extend out and working across others.
Hey, I'm Jack.
Hey, Jack.
First off, thank you. You know, as one big-nosed, unreasonable person to another,
Okay.
you know, this actually means a lot.
Patriots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be great. So, like when you were doing the Whopper sacrifice sort of thing, you're talking about pretty much having an almost antagonistic relationship with Facebook, and you know there are a lot of people that don't like it when the boat's rocked, and like you know, they often need some massaging in that regard. What's your approach to that?
You know, I think you have to be, it's like, I always say that it's the hug and shove strategy. You know, so you gotta know when to shove and when to hug. And, you know, Pete Fabat's a hugger, so he's taught me a lot about hugging. But I think you gotta walk the line, you know, and I think that if you're respectful and professional and objective, the more objective you can be in any argument, the better, and empirical, right, using data. It's like, so if you go back to that Whopper sacrifice thing, we were following we looked at the developer guidelines that Facebook had put out, and we were following everything to the T. So when we were saying we were going to do this, it wasn't saying we're just going to go rogue. I'm saying we're within your standards. So again, like, he didn't like it, but I mean, ultimately, you know, they ended up changing the guidelines during the process. But I mean, that was Facebook back in the day. And they're like, you know, you're violating the social graph. And at that point, we're like, what is the social graph? You know, we just want to make your site a little bit better, your platform better, and have some fun. And we drove them so much. We got them so many impressions too. So it's like a dance, you know. And I think that you got to remember this is a people business, and you know, I think with clients too, you've got to build great relationships. And one thing we talked about, when you're selling ideas, it's not just account people's job to sell them. Everyone in this room, it doesn't matter what you do in terms of discipline, you have to be a salesperson. And you have to be involved in the work. You know, Rob Riley, who runs McCann, is one of my good friends and former partners. You know, he was on the phone with Microsoft and Kraft, maybe more than the account team. And so it gets easier to have difficult conversations with people you have a long-standing relationship with. And then you've created some trust. So I can be a little pushy, but I know when to back off. I'll just wait a few weeks. But you know, the thing is you also need to show them that you deeply care for their business, you know. I always say, treat it like your own business, you know, and that's what we ask when people work in the agency. That's the notion of doing more with less too. And I think that, you know, we want to help Facebook. I mean, ultimately, like, this is going to be a great thing for you guys. I mean, we're going to get a ton of press. And back then, the app ecosystem, no one had really broke through in a big way, and we felt like this was a great way to drive engagement and PR for them.
Thank you.
Yeah. No one else?
CCO.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some other ways you try to break down the silos between strategy and creative on like a process on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, well, also, so our office is one place. So we have 2 giant work tables. We don't have traditional desks. And we have work tables throughout the building. We actually got rid of most of our couches and put work tables. Work tables, you're lean forward, and also they're collaboration spaces. Couches are kind of lean back, and they're just tough to work around. So putting those tables has been really important. And then it also starts with the kickoff meetings. You know, you've got to make sure that whenever you're kicking off a project, that you're inviting the right people. And you know, we have dedicated strategy, tech, UX, social leads for every account. And we make sure that those people are brought in at the right times. And frankly, collaboration is really hard. And I remember when I was talking to Pixar, because I'm like, I brought the former CTO in to talk to the agency. And I said, well, how do you guys do it? It's like, how do you bring these different thinkers, these left and right brain thinkers together? And he goes, it's a complete shit show. And I was like, thank God. Thank God you said that. But it comes down to personalities in casting. And you really just got to have like a no assholes allowed policy. And really, again, it doesn't always work. But I think that more often it does. And as much as we talk about it, even the creative leads, we ask them when they go into meetings, if you don't see a strategist in the room, ask. Don't start the meeting. But it's really, you can build processes around it, but ultimately, we always say model the way. So like Pete and I, when we're involved in meetings, we just show people that's how we work. And the other thing is, when you think about TacoBot, that's a great example. We did the Quesalupa Super Bowl campaign last year, bigger than massive integrated campaign. We did blind pre-order. That involved like everybody from every group. And so when the team starts seeing, Krylon's another example. The social team had a huge impact on that idea, the Pinterest piece. When the team starts seeing successful work that took like a bit of an army rather than 1 or 2 people, I think they're more compelled to invite people to the creative discussion.
With the takeaway everything is an idea, what would you say constitutes an idea for the everything?
It's a good point. An idea to me makes you feel something, and it's easy to remember. I'll go back to that, like a dating site for cars on Match.com, car shopping. Some of the ones I always want to get a reaction. And that one, when we showed the CEO of VW, like he immediately smiled. And, it wasn't just an idea that we got to because we thought it was funny. We actually found this insight that, every car site has a configurator. And you go on there, and you build your dream car, and then you go into the dealership, and then they're like, oh, we don't have that one. And that sucks. And then we found out, well, that's probably why people don't like dealerships. And the more we thought about it, it should work like be a system. I like red cars, I like 18-inch tires, and on and on. And then I started thinking like, I like blondes, blue eyes, that's my wife. But, that's kind of like it's like a dating service. So there's an analog there that we brought in. And it was just another way of saying it. The team originally said, well, here's the idea, Winston. It's a non-linear inventory shopping tool. I'm like, well, WTF? No one's going to care about that. So, but turning that same thing into an idea that's easy to explain, easy to pass around, and makes you feel something, emotional or a challenge you're thinking, that's what I look for. But it is a bit of a dance, I think TacoBot, right? They called that something else, but just sometimes giving it a name works. And I think that's what I learned at Crispin. When I first got to CBB, I had all these ideas, but every time I brought something forward, like Alex or other people are like, that's just a feature or a piece of functionality. And I got really frustrated at first. I'm like, no, it's awesome. It's going to be amazing. But then I learned over and over, and Jeff Benjamin's like the master of this. A sticky name matters. We did this thing called the Baby Maker 3000, which allowed you to actually turn yourself into a baby. It's a little odd, but but the point is that names are really important. I think Whopper Sacrifice is a great example of that. You know, my favorite in recent times is REI, opt outside, which is a hashtag, but that's an idea, right? Like it's easy to understand it.
Can you speak to, from your perspective, what the future of immersive media is going to be, VR, AR, that sort of thing?
Man, that's a hard one. I mean, I VR and AR, I mean, AR, obviously we saw some big leaps of Pokemon Go, right? Like, and the VR thing, I want to root for it. I was a mobile judge at Cannes last year, and I voted for New York Times VR app to be our Grand Prix. And I think that piece of work, the reason why I voted for that is I got the New York Times in LA delivered, and when I saw the Google Cardboard, everyone familiar how they distribute it? Pretty brilliant. So they have 1 million people that still get the paper. They put Google Cardboard in the paper, and then this is the way they launched their app. So they came to my house, I put the cardboard together, put the app in, and my kids played with it. And my daughter was like freaking out for like 3 hours. She was viscerally moved. And I just knew right there, I'm like, there's something game-changing about storytelling and immersion that can happen. So there's no doubt that it's going to have immersive storytelling is the future. The challenge I think we have is we have Oculus is tied to a gaming PC. Same with Vive, right? Which is gaming, I get, but it's how is it going to scale? You know, when we talk about VR, and I think Daydream and Pixel is really interesting. Again, but you're still talking about putting something in your head. But we're taking steps here, we're experimenting with it, but I'm still not seeing a ton of demand come from the brands. But I do think that it's an area for people that are coming to the business to really start to work at, because you almost have to be a game designer more than you have to do like a more linear based copywriter to understand how to write these narratives. But I mean, if anyone's had a great piece of VR, like it's incredible. It's just, it's hard for me to predict. I always look 15 minutes into the future. That's about it. But we're working with an AR company right now, actually, out of LA, working on a new product they have. But it's still so early. And who knows if it just gets left. But the immersive storytelling, being able to tell a story in a nonlinear format, for sure, is going to be a big deal. Anything else?